Hey, it's a Jane Eyre review! A little over a year ago, I reviewed the few clips of the Czech version of Jane Eyre that are on YouTube. I enjoyed them a lot, and I really wished that there was a way that I could see the whole thing. Well, because of the magic of the internet, dreams can come true. A few months ago, I was contacted by one of you wonderful people and told how I could see it. It actually turned out to be right under my nose. I just needed someone to point me in the right direction. So, thank you, Julie. This version is a 4-part television series from 1972, officially titled Jana, Eyrova, and starring, please excuse my mispronunciation, Marta Vancurova as Jane and Jan Kacer as Rochester. I've got a lot to say and not very much time to say it, so I'll get going. Starting right off, there are two things this version did awesomely, and I kind of had a feeling that I would think they were awesome in the full version because they were awesome in the clips. The first thing is the music. It's so emotional, and I like emotional music. Just the way that the orchestra was used, from the woodwinds to the strings and then the piano, it was delightful. It was notable, I thought, that at different points both Jane and Rochester played some music from the soundtrack on the piano. I thought that was really different. We don't usually see Rochester playing anything on the piano. It's quite possibly my favorite music in any Jane Eyre adaptation. It felt like an additional, invisible character in the show. I just wish that it was a little more seamless at times. I don't know if the music was written for the film or not. I'm not even sure who the composer is, but there were a couple moments when the music abruptly cut off, like when a scene started. I didn't like that, especially when I just wanted the music to continue forever. The other awesome thing that this version had was atmosphere. So much atmosphere, and technically I think the music is a contributing factor in this. Jane likes to walk around the grounds at Thornfield. She likes to wander, and it struck me what an appealing location it is for wandering. The woods are really spooky, and Jane seemed to appreciate that. Later, there's a scene. Now, this was kind of weird. There's a scene where Jane is doing housekeeping in the cottage, and a girl is helping her, and the wind is howling outside, the music is kind of threatening, almost like a horror movie, and it shows an image of the moon and the clouds blowing over it, and the girl leaves, and Jane is left by herself, and everything about the moment seemed so foreboding that I was like, is someone gonna come in and murder Jane Eyre? Wow, what a twist that would be! I don't know why I sounded so gleeful saying that. That would be terrible. There is a considerable amount of time in this version where nothing is happening. It's a slower movie. There's time where Jane is just moving from one spot to another, or she's moving around a room, or there are just two people sitting in a room together doing little things. If you're looking for an action-packed version, this probably isn't it, because it is slow, and I admit there were times when I was watching where I was just like, something happened, come on. I got restless, I had to break it up. It took me a long time to get through it, just because I have a hard time sitting and watching something long on my laptop, and something where nobody's speaking English, that makes it even harder. But you know what? These slow-moving parts did add to the atmosphere and to the mood, and I feel like this is how the Czechs chose to tell the story, and it makes its own impression, which is different from any other version. Even in the case of two people just sitting in a room together, it is conveying a sense of realism, and also, in one instance in particular that I'm thinking of, it's when Jane and St. John are together, and there's a ticking clock in the background. It just goes on and on and on, and it really grates on your nerves. But I felt like that ticking clock, the annoying sound, was actually adding to the on-screen tension between Jane and St. John. I don't know if that was what they intended, but that was my impression. So on the whole, this version focuses more on the quiet, thoughtful moments and conversations, and the actors, especially Jane, behave accordingly. I like this Jane. She has this sweet, unassuming air about her. She has really big eyes and a narrow face, and at times she looked like such a tortured, wistful soul that it was instinctive to like her and to want her to be happy. She never overacts, she's very subtle, and even the way she shows her despair was soft and gentle, and in a way that felt even sadder. I guess I could say that in those moments when Jane is supposed to reveal that secret, independent, and passionate nature that comes surging up when she feels there's some injustice, there is a little less fire to this Jane, but I don't know, you need to judge it based on the acting in this version as a whole, because everything is so subtle, and if she went really intense and emotional in those moments, then it would seem like overacting would be over the top. Rochester, on the other hand, I was all over the place with this Rochester. Sometimes I liked him, sometimes I didn't like him so much. My notes are full of contrary comments, like, this Rochester is a little more on the excitable side, and he's so broody. And then there were things where I said, oh, he's a very even-tempered Rochester. Looks-wise, I thought he seemed younger than the average Rochester, although he's 12 years older than the actress playing Jane. He spends a lot of time wearing this shirt and vest combination that I didn't really care for. It reminded me of somebody, Little John in Robin Hood, maybe. He's got more of a 70s look to his hair, and he has a goatee, but he's not unattractive. I thought he looked best in the post-wedding, disheveled, fancy dress clothes. I thought that scene was particularly good for showing the stark contrast in Jane and Rochester's temperaments. Jane just remains quietly firm and understated by the window, while Rochester paces around, shouting, and then he's pleading, and sometimes he's upset, sometimes he's outraged, and at one point, this was a funny thing, I couldn't understand anything that they were saying. I was just guessing based on what I know from the book and having watched umpteen Jane Eyres by now, but at one point I knew exactly what he was saying based solely on his delivery, and I think that means that he was doing a good job. Because I don't speak Czech, I did have to rely a lot on acting and body language to observe how the relationship was progressing. I can tell you this, Rochester seems to be a leaner. There were 2 times that he leaned, and I half expected someone to yell out from off-screen, "Hey Jane, is that guy bothering you? Because it looks like he's leaning." And you get 50 points if you know what movie that's from. So how does it fare as an adaptation? From what I can tell, based on the length of certain conversations and little things that they included and the sequence of events, I'd say it's a faithful adaptation for the most part. It does start with Jane's arrival at Thornfield, like the old abridged radio and television versions do, and there are no flashbacks to Gateshead and Lowood. If they're mentioned, I didn't know. I do think it's odd that such a long adaptation doesn't include those sizable portions of the book. I guess you could say it fills up the gaps with music and atmosphere. There are aspects of it where it seems a little disproportionate. There's a little bit of time spent in the beginning with these 2 nosy maids at Thornfield. I don't know what the point of that was. But on the other hand, Bertha was in it hardly at all. Like, I think we saw her for all of 1 second, and I feel like there wasn't much Adele either. And then another weird thing was that when St. finds Jane outside the house, he carries her in, and that's the end of one part. And then in the next part, Jane is at her teacher's cottage. And I was like, did I skip something by mistake? I don't think I did. They just kind of jumped over a little bit. Not a huge jump, it's a little jump, but it was still a little bit... So there are some things about this that were not perfect. It does have a gypsy scene though, and you know that always wins massive bonus points in my book. And at first I thought they weren't going to do it, and then it was happening, and I was so excited, except that I felt like actually deducting points for how they did it, because instead of focusing on this mysterious conference between Jane and the gypsy, they keep showing this woman. I don't know if it was just a random maid or if it was Grace Poole. Honestly, I couldn't remember what Grace Poole looked like. It was very hard for me with different people in the house. They focus on her eavesdropping on the other side of the door and reacting to what they're saying, and it was so frustrating because she could understand everything that they were saying, but I couldn't, and I just wanted her to go away because her presence was spoiling the entire moment for me. So, yeah, there's a gypsy scene, but it's not the greatest gypsy scene. If you want to know how faithful the dialogue was to the book, I can't tell you. I'd like to know for myself. On my unofficial list of 5 favorite things about Jane Eyre, one of the 5 is Jane and Rochester's witty conversations, and that is something that I miss here. It's just not the same when you aren't sure what they're saying to each other. Having subtitles would help with that, and I've already been contacted by one of you interested in making subtitles, and I think that would be amazing, especially because I'm sure there are a bunch of people who have heard of this version, but maybe decided not to see it because no subtitles, and it's kind of a lot to ask for someone to watch a movie that's 4 hours long and they won't understand what's being said. So if somebody wants to do that incredible task, I would greatly appreciate it. I'm sure other people would. That would be wonderful. Unfortunately, as it stands now, I feel like I can't say that this version is a favorite because, to me, Jane Eyre is as much a thing to be listened to as it is to be watched, because it is a very conversation-heavy drama. And so the lack of that conversation and the fact that you don't get to hear your favorite, my favorite lines being said is a drawback. But overall, it is a very attractive old production, and of the foreign versions that are out there, of which I have seen a few now, I think it's one of the best, quite possibly the best and my favorite of the foreign ones. The music alone. So that's what I think of the Czech Jane Eyre, and I hope that more people will check this out. I hope this raises a little more awareness of this version, because there are some really good things about it. And if you are familiar with it, if you've seen it, go ahead and share what you thought about it. Thanks for watching. Bye!